Dan and Amy, and so this story comes to us from the Chicago Tribune. Stacey St. Clair reporting. This is the story of Corey Walgren, a 16-year-old Naperville North high school student who committed suicide.
Honor roll student, played football, was on the hockey. Never in trouble.
Here's what happened. He had what's being described as a sexual encounter with a 16-year-old classmate. That girl reported the incident to the dean because she believed that he had done two things. One is recorded their encounter, and two is shared it with his friends. The dean at Naperville North called police. The young man, Corey, no criminal history, never been in trouble at school, was suspected of having a video on his phone of a consensual sexual encounter.
Which actually turned out just to be an audio, not a video.
He was called into the dean's office. There, with a police officer and the campus dean, Corey was questioned about possessing and possibly sharing, quote, unquote, child pornography. Allegedly, he was threatened that he'd be put on the state's sex offender registry. Then he was left alone to wait for his mother. It does not appear from the evidence that the reporter for the Tribune gathered that there were any pornographic images found on Corey's phone. It did contain the audio file that you just referenced, Amy, of the sexual encounter. Tribune also reporting police did not intend to pursue charges, and they indicated they wanted to handle the matter in a way that Corey understood the seriousness of his actions and how it affected his classmates. This comes from heavily redacted police reports and documents from the DuPage County Coroner's Office that the Tribune obtained. Here's what actually happened after that encounter with police and the dean. Mom was called. While Mom was en route, Corey walked out of the school, walked to downtown Naperville, and threw himself off the top of a parking deck.
Mom's a nurse. Left, said, I can get there in 45 minutes. They had her on a speakerphone call and said, this is what the allegations are. And she said her heart just sank because her head was spinning. This is a lot to process.
I got a phone call from the Dean Madden. I was like, wait. I said, my head is spinning right now. I need to be there in person. I need to be there with Corey, and I need to hear what's going on. So when they said he left, I said, well, he must have thought he could go back to class. And they said, no, we made it very clear that he was supposed to stay right here. Where is he? Have you checked in the classroom? Is he in the class? Did he go back to class? And that's when they start, what class would he be in right now? And they start looking through, and then they call the class. So I got the impression they hadn't started looking for him. The police report says otherwise. It says that they had started looking for him before I got there.
Well, his backpack was still there with the keys to the house and there, so they know that he wasn't going home, and he left the school.
312-642-5600, turnkey.pro answer line, 64636DA, turnkey.pro text line. Does Naperville North and the Naperville Police Department, do they collectively bear any responsibility for this young man tragically taking his life? I'll add this addition, which was properly covered by the Tribune. Illinois law requires police to, quote, immediately make a reasonable attempt to notify the parent, unquote, immediately, after a minor is taken into custody. What is custody? Good question. Unless a juvenile believes he is free to stop the questioning and walk out of the room, according to Northwestern University law professor Sheila Betty, he is considered to be in police custody. There's no question his parents should have been called, said that Northwestern law professor. The clear intent of the law is to give a parent the opportunity to intervene if their child is being interrogated. And I would suggest that if you're, number one, asking questions about the encounter in question, and number two, and this is alleged, but making threats about ending up on the sex offender registry list, then you're in a custodial interrogation.
Yeah, but here's the bottom line. They had no intention of ever charging him. They were trying to scare him straight. I think they were abusing their power, like being the big guys, bullying this kid, saying, look, this is what could happen. And I understand that, but We trust our kids with our teachers, and they took advantage of the situation. And I think that they have blood on their hands because they scared him to death. Instead, he left the building. He went and he committed suicide within less than an hour.
Naperville Police Chief Robert Marshall called Corey's death a tragedy, but he said the officer who questioned him acted properly. This is the police chief. At the time of the incident, the police department determined that the school resource officer followed proper policies and procedures. Not surprisingly, Naperville District 203 also defended their handling, saying, at the outset of this incident, we worked to ensure a thorough and fair review of the facts and involve the appropriate school and law enforcement officials. Our main concern with any matter involving students is fairness, discretion, and objectivity. The school district feels confident we handle this issue appropriately and engage the right officials pursuant to the protocols and procedures that govern student affairs. Now, there is the issue on the school side of state mandates on principals and other persons in charge of school districts in terms of how to handle these situations. The failure to call mom or dad right away, I think, is a problem.
Yeah.
And then the larger, so that's a short-term legal problem. I think the larger problem here in this discussion, and it has to be a part of it, is the absolute lack of judgment by adults in charge of institutions like schools and police departments. We have rules. We don't have judgments. And we have procedures and protocols. We don't have any judgment, any common sense, any decency in some respects, because I can't be decent to you because the rules say this. This is not to say lawlessness and everybody just does what they want, makes up their own rules.
Right, but sometimes there's youthful indiscretions. I mean, there's mistakes that teenagers make. He was allegedly with his 16-year-old girlfriend. He's 16, his girlfriend's 16.
Mm-hmm.
And this came about because the 16-year-old girlfriend or friend had heard about that he was showing it to other people,
right,
or having them listen to it, and she was mortified. So.
Yeah, and so here's the thing about rules and policies and procedures. They cannot account for everything in the world that might happen, for every situation you may have to deal with as a school resource officer, as a principal, as a campus dean. So when does adult judgment come into play, and how should we hold people accountable for judgments they make? Following the rules, does that absolve you of any culpability, moral or legal? 312-642-5600, turnkey.pro answer line. If this was your child, what would you do?
Well, then it gets worse, and I think everyone needs to hear this, because this woman who brought him into this world was denied being with him when he left this world.
I don't know if at that point, I think at that point he said had jumped or fallen from the top of a parking garage, and they're working on him now. They're on their way to the hospital. At this point, I didn't know he was alive or not, but I just knew he was dead. I just knew it. And I just kept saying that over and over again to Officer Hoying. I just know he's dead. I just know he's dead. I know it. I know it. I was right there by the parking garage. I could have ridden in the ambulance with him, and he wasn't declared dead until he got to the hospital. The doctor told me that he was still breathing, and the coroner's report said when he landed he was still breathing. They inserted a chest tube. They were doing CPR on him. But by the time I got there, it probably about an hour later.
See, so she kept asking, "Where's my son?" They said, "No, ma'am, please come back to the school." And they demanded, the police officer told her, "Come back to the school." And she said, "Well, I want to know where he is." And if you would have just told her the truth, he jumped, he's in an ambulance, he's 5 blocks away from you. She just wanted to be there with him when he transitioned, and that they denied her that too.
Was this a criminal matter? When we grew up, this would have been a matter between the school and the parents of the children involved. Is this a law enforcement matter? Another question to ponder. Let's take some calls. Charlotte in Arlington Heights, you're on Chicago's Morning Answer.
Hi, good morning. Say, I seem to remember a double standard. If a pregnant minor girl were, if she were pregnant and told a counselor she planned to get an abortion, would the counselor be required to tell the parents?
Okay. Right. Thanks for the call, Charlotte. Maddie in Forest Park.
Orland Park. Good morning,
Orland Park.
Jen and Amy.
Sorry.
I do believe that the school, there's going to be a really fine line on laying out the timeline and all of that. I do believe that they should have told Mom so she could have gone there. But I think because he was a great student, he was the all-around athlete. I read the article. The night before, they talked about college.
Yeah.
I think that's what pushed him to suicide because, at that point, a 16-year-old, their processing is not the logic that we use. All he could see was how he was destroying his own reputation and the reputation of his family. What would his parents think? How could he show his face at school? And I think that being a good kid is what pushed him over the edge.
Well, that's perhaps right. Thanks for the call, Maddie. I mean, that's sort of one of the points here is that kind of intimidating, if you will. You're going to be on the sex offender registry list. You're basically...
His life's over. I mean, you're not going to get into University of Minnesota or University of Iowa with child pornography charge and on a registered sex offender list.
And to Maddie's point, this is why 16-year-olds aren't in charge of schools. This is why 16-year-olds are not treated as of age, is because they don't process things the same way, is because they don't have the same...
Because they're minors.
Because they're not intellectually developed, because they don't have the same skill sets, because they do things that are rash and intemperate. They make mistakes like we all did when we were 16. So we can go back and say, should he have recorded that encounter with his girlfriend or this girl at school? No, of course not.
It's a two-party consent state, but that's a separate issue.
Well, come on.
Well, I mean, you can't secretly record people.
The bottom line is this. Should he have engaged in the sexual encounter? No. Should he have recorded the sexual encounter? No. Is the response to that proportional? That's the question. And the answer is no. David in Naperville.
Yeah, I don't know that that's the question, but I think
it is.
A couple of things. First, well, just hear me then. First of all, you can't interrogate a 16-year-old without the parents there. That's a big issue.
Yes.
Big issue. And I'm not going to pretend I'm a police officer, so I'm not going to like they pretended they were psychologists and practicing without a license. But I don't think that the law states that 16 and 16 is child pornography or anything like that. I think there's a 5-year age difference for all that in Illinois. But you really can't just go in there and pretend you're going to scare this kid when you don't know what you're doing. Because like Amy said, you don't know how the kid's going to react because they don't have the experience. They're just police officers. Honestly, they're just police officers. And they made so many mistakes. And the bottom line is somebody's little boy's dead. And it's just unbelievable. My wife and I just can't get over this.
Yeah. Thanks for the call, David. That's right. I agree with that.
And do you remember hearing about this story when it happened?
I remember hearing about the suicide or his death. I didn't know the backstory.
So horrific.
I did not know the backstory.
Throw yourself off a 5-story building.
Robert in Northbrook.
Yeah, the point is what that gentleman just said. You bring in the parents first.
Yeah.
The parents have to be there. No one defended the kid. He's just in there getting the heck beat out of him, scared beyond belief. And you have to remember where our society is now. Right now, if my son wants to be a girl, he can go into the girl's bathroom, vice versa. So didn't our own society bring this upon ourselves? Think about it. You can't get federal funding unless if you're a girl and then you're going to be a boy, you're a girl, you can go into the shower rooms. So at what point does society go, whoa, we got to rethink this?
Thanks for the call, Robert. Here's the other thing about this is the campus dean that was in the room. I don't know what he did or didn't do, so I'm just going to suggest that this is something he should have done, and he may have. When the police officer is threatening him, if that's what's alleged, if that actually happened, where's the campus dean to step in and say, wait, hey, let's just wait until mom gets here. She's going to be here in 15 minutes. Let's wait till mom gets here. I want mom present before we start, making any assertions about what is going to happen or not happen to Corey. Brandon and Mantino, you're on Chicago's Morning Answer.
Hey, good morning. My name is Brandon. My son had committed suicide just a few months ago, and as a result of that, we started a foundation where our goal is to educate law enforcement and educators on how to handle kids in crisis. And in this situation, it's clear that these two people, the police liaison officer, school liaison officer, and the dean, were not prepared to handle somebody in crisis. Matter of fact, they made the situation even worse by threatening the student and actually causing the crisis. You know, I've worked in law enforcement for 20-plus years, and there's no reason ever to have to actually threaten a student to get an answer for questions like this. They should have been able to sit down with that student and have a real discussion with them, and they should have done it with the parents present. It's a shame what happened here, and it just all comes down to education and training.
Thanks for the call, Brandon. I'm very sorry about your son, but I appreciate that perspective, that informed perspective. And it's something, Brandon brings up something too. Remember what the courts have also held about schools, that students have fewer rights in a school setting because administrators have a legitimate need to maintain the learning environment. So in other words, they have wide berth to say, give me your cell phone. I'm going to look in your locker. Pull that audio file. So why not wait for mom? Michael in Naperville.
Yeah, hi. Yeah, my point would be that the police didn't even know whether or not the kid was guilty of the crime, in that it could have been very feasible that she recorded it on his phone, kind of like as a goofy gift. And then when he started sharing it, that's what made her upset, not the fact that it was recorded.
Yeah.
So the police acted like judge, jury, and executioner here.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for
when they didn't even know if he was guilty.
Good point.
Yeah, it's fair. Thanks for the call, Michael. Paula in Glendale Heights.
Good morning. How are you?
Good.
You know, there's so many people here that failed this poor kid. I'm shocked, though. My 16-year-old, I asked him the other night, I said, son, if you ever wanted to, could you ever leave your high school? He said no.
Yeah.
There are security guards at every single exit. There would be no way. So how on earth did this kid get off the campus?
Yep, that's a great point.
I would shocked
Especially
to
after
hear
receiving that news.
Thanks for the call, Paula. Yeah, it's a great point
receiving
in
that
context.
Life-changing accusations against you, and you just walk out.
That's a great point. That's another one of the important questions that needs to be answered. Margot in Burr Ridge.
Yeah, well, lots of studies have shown that young men, in particular, even more than young women, do not develop fully emotionally until age 26. That's why they can't rent a car until age 26 and a few other things. They shouldn't be voting, actually, until age 26. But the point is, these high school administrators are highly paid to understand and know all this. That's why they're called professionals. They should have known that this young man was not fully emotionally developed. I'm not a high school professional, but I know that. And I lay it on their door. I mean, the police have their job to do, but these high school administrators should have been sensitive to this kid's situation and his age and his emotional development.
Thanks for the call, Margot. I mean, and here's the thing. This piece from Psychology Today, Dr. Mary Lamia, who is a psychologist, shame is especially difficult, if not toxic, for children because it's an emotion that is concealed, especially by victims of aggression or abuse. The anticipation of being shamed by peers creates anxiety in a child if he is the object of bullying. And it goes on to talk about the power of shame, which is why it's used as a political tool.
And he was
so
bullied
often.
by adults.
And again,
by adults.
And again, you didn't have to have a psychologist on staff. You didn't have to expect the officer to be a psychologist. You didn't have to expect the campus dean to be a psychologist. You just had to wait for mom. Mike in Melrose Park.
Hi, good morning. Hey, my question is, why was the school involved at all? Likely this did not occur on campus. And why would, it's like something happening at, being interrogated at work for something that didn't happen at work. How did the two blend? Why wasn't he just, if it was so serious, why didn't they just take him to the police station and not have any kind of high school principals involved at all?
Because they just wanted to scare him. They didn't want to charge him.
Thanks for the call, Mike.